Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a really fascinating, honestly kind of myth-busting investigation into one of the most debated timelines in all of human history, the Bible's timeline for the end of the world. We're going to look at the historical data, break down the ancient texts, and figure out exactly what the earliest Christian leaders were actually anticipating. So get ready, because we are diving deep into the ancient perspective on time itself.
So, here's the central mystery we're unpacking today. When you read the letters of the New Testament, especially the ones written by Paul, it really seems like he and the other early Christians believed Jesus was returning in their actual literal lifetimes. They wrote with incredible urgency, and yet here we are, roughly 2,000 years later, and we are still waiting. So, did they just get it wrong? Were they mistaken prophets who predicted a doomsday that just never showed up?
To really understand the accusation against these authors, consider 1 Thessalonians 4:15. It's essentially the smoking gun for critics. Paul writes, "We who are still alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord." Notice that word, we. Paul explicitly includes himself in the group of people who would be physically alive at the end of the world. It looks like a hard prediction, right?
Now, before we go any further, let's establish a really crucial piece of terminology you're going to hear a lot today, parousia. It's a Greek word that's consistently used throughout these texts to refer to the coming of Christ at the end of history, what's commonly known today as the Second Coming. So when we talk about the delay of the parousia, we're talking about the 2 millennia wait for this exact event.
Section 1. Did Paul get it wrong? Let's dive into his letters and find out.
According to Dr. Dave Mathewson's analysis, there is a massive academic debate around that exact "we who are alive" quote. Some critics argue Paul legitimately thought he'd survive to see the Parousia, and then later in his life, as he got older and faced execution, he had to frantically backpedal and change his theology. But as we're about to see by looking closely at the source texts, that's actually a complete misunderstanding of his actual views.
Moving on to Section 2, a new view of time. To crack this case, we have to shift our focus to our first major clue, found in 1 Corinthians 7.
In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul gives some very intense lifestyle advice. And he uses these 3 specific phrases to justify it: the present distress, the time is short, and the world is passing away. Now, if you just glance at these, they sound like someone shouting that the sky is falling, right? Like an immediate doomsday prediction. But scholars argue these phrases are vastly misinterpreted. They aren't calendar predictions at all. They're profound shifts in perspective.
So the absolutely crucial point is right here in the language itself. When Paul says the time is short, the original Greek word is a participle that actually translates better to shortened or compressed. Paul isn't starting a ticking countdown clock. He's explaining that because of the events of the first century, time itself has become compressed. It creates this deep, driving urgency for how believers should live their day-to-day lives right now, regardless of when the clock actually stops.
And this brilliantly illustrates a core theological concept called inaugurated eschatology. Basically, this means that for Paul, the end times weren't some distant future event they were sitting around waiting to start. The end times had already begun with the first coming of Christ. They weren't waiting for the book to open. They were already living in the final chapter, just waiting for the final paragraph to be written.
Section 3. Alive or asleep. Let's cross-examine Paul's own writings in 1 Thessalonians 5 to see if this whole false prediction theory holds water. Remember that smoking gun quote from earlier, "We who are alive"? Well, check out what Paul writes literally just a few verses later in the very next chapter. He says, "Whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him." In this context, asleep is simply a euphemism for death. So within the exact same letter, Paul actively prepares his readers for the very real possibility of his own death. He absolutely did not guarantee he would survive until the Parousia. As Dr. Mathewson notes, Paul's logic is actually incredibly simple here. Because he simply didn't know the day or the hour of the return, he naturally grouped himself into the only category he currently belonged to, the living. He wrote to the living, as a living person, hoping for the parousia in his lifetime for sure, but fully aware and fully prepared for the possibility of a delay that would outlast his mortal life.
Section 4. The pre-return checklist. The evidence actually goes even deeper in 2 Thessalonians 2, where Paul is arguing against people who thought the end of the world had already arrived.
In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul gives his readers an actual visual checklist. He explicitly lists out global historical events that absolutely must happen before the Parousia can occur. Number 1, the rebellion or apostasy.
Number 2, a figure called the man of lawlessness must be revealed. And number 3, something called the restrainer must be removed. Paul's essentially telling his readers, look around. Have these things happened? No? Then the end isn't here yet.
Now, here's where it gets kind of funny for modern historians. In the text, Paul casually says to his readers, "Don't you remember that when I was with you, I used to tell you these things?" So he doesn't even bother explaining what the restrainer or the man of lawlessness actually are in the letter. As scholar Gordon Fee points out, 2,000 years later, we are left totally in the dark, doing a massive amount of guesswork trying to decode Paul's inside information.
But honestly, the mystery of the checklist isn't really the point. The core takeaway is the sheer existence of the list itself. Even if modern scholars are endlessly debating whether the restrainer was the Roman Empire or the Archangel Michael, the fact that Paul gave them a list of unfulfilled prerequisites proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that he fully expected and allowed for a delay before the end of the world.
Section 5. Purpose in the pause. Okay, so we've established they expected a delay. But why? Let's bring in a crucial clue from 2 Peter 3 to solve the why behind this waiting period.
Think about the number 80. 80 years is roughly the average human lifespan today. Because our lives are so finite, any historical delay, even just a decade or two, feels agonizingly long to us. When you only have 80 years on this earth, a 2,000-year delay feels like an eternity. We look at history through a very, very tiny keyhole. But the author of 2 Peter addresses this exact human frustration by contrasting the micro with the macro. He writes that, "To the Lord, one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like one day." Now, this isn't just poetry. It's a profound theological shift. God sees the entirety of history at once, from an eternal viewpoint. He stands outside of time. So what feels like an intolerable delay to a human living an 80-year life is literally just the blink of an eye from a divine perspective.
And here is the ultimate solution to the mystery. Peter explicitly explains exactly why the timeline is stretched out like this. The delay is not a broken promise. It's not a false prophecy. It's a deliberate act of mercy. The text says God is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but all to come to repentance. The pause isn't an accident. It's a deliberate, patient strategy to maximize human salvation.
Dr. Mathewson's notes perfectly summarize Peter's argument here. The early church was completely aware that time was marching on, and they directly addressed the critics of their day who mocked the delay. They didn't hide from the passage of time. They embraced it as a feature of God's patience, not a bug in their theology.
Okay, let's synthesize this whole investigation. Did the New Testament authors get it wrong? Well, the evidence says no. First, they believed time was compressed by the arrival of Christ, creating an urgency for daily living, not a doomsday clock. Second, their timeline was always flexible, allowing for specific historical events to unfold first. And third, they firmly believed that any delay had a profound purpose. It was an act of divine mercy. They were focused on a state of readiness rather than circling some rigid calendar date.
Which brings us to our final thought. The ancients viewed their era with an intense sense of purpose. They didn't view time as endless. They viewed it as a limited window of grace. So, if we take this ancient framework seriously, the idea that time is compressed and every delayed day is a deliberate act of mercy, it leaves us with a pretty powerful question. How are you using the time you have right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you next time.